Hi there, nice to meet you.
You too. How's it going?
Um, Great. Thank you so much for doing this interview. It means so much to me and it will to my singers and the audience. Thank you so much.
No, real pleasure.
Yeah. Um, well, I would like to introduce you, uh, and then I would like to ask you some questions about being a composer, and I will, uh, I will start with talking about your childhood. Your parents were architects, and what I hear in your music is this fabulous understanding of shape and size and rhythm and how it all fits together. And I've been listening to your music for a couple of years now, and been studying all the things that you're doing with all of that. And it's just it's thrilling. It's thrilling. Your voice is unique. It's alive, and it grabs people. I know it grabs me, and I just think it's wonderful. And my father was composing at the piano as well, and my sister played viola. I played violin, and and I know you played viola and you
Yeah.
played organ. I didn't play organ, but but anyway, I hear that throughout your vision, and you're able to reach people. So maybe that's one of the things that I would like to introduce about you, and that you've you're a contemporary opera composer who is actually terribly successful. You've won in 2008, you won the Novello Award for classical music, and you were made the commander of the British Empire, and you were part of Queen Elizabeth's 2019 birthday honors celebration. I mean, that really says a lot because, Queen Elizabeth has supported the arts so in such a beautiful, beautiful way, and there you are really honored and presented to the world as you should be. And your performances have been over 5 continents, and you seem to be very committed to community and to create wonder and also to enrich all our lives. I took those words from your bio, and another little thing in common. I'm a choral director, but I have spent my life singing. My grandmother was a concert artist, so at age 12 I began voice lessons, and then I went on to sing professionally. And I now have had a group in the Monterey Peninsula, probably maybe 15 years now or more. But I have this concept that if you combine the community singer with the professional singer, I have a few volunteers in my group, but most of them are professionals. And I think the professionals help the volunteers, and the volunteers help the professionals. And I just
Yeah.
love to see that exchange and growth of education and learning and inspiring each other. And I just have to add, I love some of the places that you've performed, like from a warehouse to like the flight, which is like right at an airport. I mean, how amazing is that? I mean, that's just like, I don't think that's so exciting. Um,
Gosh. Well, you've touched on a lot of themes there, so we could drill into some of them straight away if you like, or if you wanted to say more.
no, I think I'll just jump into my questions and
Yeah.
let you go where you want to go. So I'm gonna ask as my first question, what are your earliest memories as a musician?
The earliest memories I have really are of my mother playing the piano. She was an architect, as you've mentioned, and indeed my siblings ended up being architects, and my sister married an architect. So there's really very deep rooted in the family. But when the children had gone to bed, my mother used to play the piano, and as I was drifting off to sleep, I would hear this music in the distance. Beautiful music. She was a very good pianist, and she played Handel's Largo and Clair de Lune, but also sometimes things from Oklahoma or Oh What a Lovely War. It was quite a range of music. And then the next day, I would try and play by ear what I'd heard her playing, and that way I discovered I had perfect pitch and I could actually get the right notes. But I also discovered that it's often easier to make things up than to learn somebody else's music. So as time went on, I ended up just spending more and more time making up things at the piano. But so that was definitely formative, and also because of my mother's interests, she was a keen churchgoer. I was brought up Catholic, although I've ended up writing a lot of music for the Church of England. But I went to a Catholic school. And so we would go with my mother to church on a Sunday, and she liked to sing in the choir. And so as my brother and sister and I would sing. But then I became fascinated by the organ and just the wealth of sound. I mean, the power of the sound. I mean, it was partly just the volume, I think, was very compelling, but also the colours in the sound of the organ. And so, first of all, I just used to try and make the piano at home sound like an organ by pounding it very forcefully. But then I think when I was about 12, I started playing the organ at church. First of all on a Tuesday evening service, and then they let me loose on the mass on a Sunday, and I've made a little money by playing for weddings. So there was it was a modest choir, not. I think we only at that church we sang everything in unison, but in my teens I started playing the organ in another nearby church where they had a more sophisticated 4-part choir, and so I wrote a couple of very early compositions for those choirs, and so there was always this mixture of singing and playing. And at school I sang in the school choir, and when I was a boy treble I had quite a good voice. My tenor voice was not so special, but as a boy treble I remember singing the Pie Jesu in the Fore Requiem. That was a fine moment. And also we kind of copied the King's College Cambridge service of 9 lessons in carols in my school. We went to our local cathedral, and so I got to sing once in Royal David City as a solo one year. So that was very exciting. But I think a big formative experience was when my school choir joined forces. It became affiliated to the Royal Schools of Church Music, and that meant joining with a kind of super choir. I think this happened I think I can remember it happening twice, but each of the choirs would learn the same music. So the books were sent out, all over London, maybe further afield, I think. And I suppose there would be 40 people in our school choir, but the super choir was maybe 1,000 voices, all singing this music. And that was an amazing sensation. And it was something very vivid for me that I could make a small contribution to my choir, but that could be part of this huge sound, and that there was something that was sort of bigger than all of us and something that we could be proud of. And I think that experience was behind my fascination with community operas, which you mentioned. I think that was a way of trying to recapture that feeling of being in large, just a very large body of singers, and that the thrillingly powerful sound that we can make in large groups, even if our individual voices are not so remarkable, because no one will ever pay to hear me sing solo. But as part of a group, I can be part of something wonderful.
Oh, that's a wonderful answer. It's more than an answer, and it helps. We're going to perform "They Will Rise," and the way you have composed the pacing of the drama and the chorus and the full-bodied sound of the organ. I understand this much more. So thank you.
Yes, I mean, I'm having to look at it to remind myself. It was a few years ago that I wrote it, but I remember it felt very personal, and because it was written for the
World War One,
the centenary of the Royal Air Force, and by nature, I've always really felt like a pacifist. But so I wasn't sure about celebrating the Royal Air Force for a moment. But then I thought of how stupid of me. Of course, my uncle was in the Royal Air Force and was killed in the Second World War. He was a rear gunner in the dam busters. These Lancaster bombers that dropped the bouncing bombs to blow up dams. And my mother always had a photograph of, obviously I never met him, but his photograph was always on the wall in my parents' bedroom. So my mother looked at it every day and remembered him. And so I was thinking about that. So it was, in a way, it was in fact, I dedicated the piece to his memory. So it was a chance to write something personal, and I think that helped to want to write something that wasn't like official music. It wasn't something for a formal occasion. It was more about the idea of flying and heroism, but thinking of a real person, and I suppose trying to suggest something about also what it's like to fly in an aeroplane. It's not just flying on your own wings, but you're soaring like eagles, and it's a wonderful image. Yeah. And I suppose that's something that I get a lot out of poetry, and out of particular lines, particular choices of words can sometimes spark an idea. It's often it's a major source of inspiration.
Well, I need to add that right next to my bed in the bedroom is a picture of my father's ship in World War II,
Wow.
transport carrier, where he was at the Normandy invasion on the second wave. And I have that picture right next to my bed, and I often show it to people if I'm, talking about this or that, or I'm, but anyway, it comes up a lot. So that's lovely. I look at that picture often too.
Well, it's a big deal, isn't it, to think about the sacrifices that were made for us to enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy and take for granted now.
It is. And I hear that in your music, and it's thrilling. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then if you could describe a little bit about your musical education, and that can be formal or informal. What were the things that formed you?
I'd say there are like three stages. A really important set of experiences for me was during my adolescence and my teenage years, when I went to secondary school. And that coincided with a new music centre opening up, which was for a London-wide music centre. And I was eligible to attend. And so that meant every Saturday I went and learnt. I started the violin initially, that later changed to viola, and the piano. So I had an hour on each of those instruments. There was an hour of theory, and in the afternoon it was an ensemble, so there was a string orchestra that I played in, and that was an introduction to a whole range of music, but also just to making music together. And that led to being part of a youth orchestra, the London Schools Symphony Orchestra, in which I had my first trip to the United States in bicentennial year in 1976. I came with the orchestra and we did concerts. We did 18 concerts in 5 states in 21 days, as I remember it. It was insane. But it included playing in the Hollywood Bowl and Carnegie Hall. So, you can't beat that. And we were conducted by Sir Simon Rattle. I mean, he wasn't Sir Simon then. He was just Simon Rattle. He was, I think, 3 years older than the average age of the orchestra at that time. But he was a real whiz kid conductor. It was amazing. So that was you can see that's an immensely rich experience of so many different kinds or aspects of musicianship that were involved. And particularly, I think sitting in the middle of the orchestra, playing the viola, you're not always playing the most interesting part, but you're right in the middle. And so you've got this perfect vantage point for seeing what it is that everyone does, how an orchestra is put together, what the different roles of the different instruments are, what things sound good, and what things you want to hear more of. So that was a lesson in orchestration, and so useful for me when I started writing operas. And yeah. So that was, I'd say that's like sort of phase 1. And then I suppose phase 2 would be university, which involved a lot of music making and a lot of thinking about music and being exposed to more music, and thinking about it probably in more detail than I had before. But then I think of it as still part of my education, although it was also really when I was starting to make a living in the world of music. But I think of it as a kind of apprenticeship. I played the piano for opera rehearsals and also orchestrated the operas that we were rehearsing for a touring opera company orchestra. It was a chamber orchestra, like 15 players. And so I did a handful of operas, but that was in itself an education too, because it involves studying. I mean, looking at works of Puccini and Verdi and Wagner and Janacek and thinking, how can I make the same sounds or get the same impact with far fewer instruments? What do I need to do? And so that made me really think about why the composers had written those notes in that way and why they'd use those instrumental colours, and thinking about how I might be able to achieve something similar, even with smaller forces. So, and it was also an education in opera singing and what the life of an opera singer is like, and how different it is to be a singer to being an instrumentalist. And particularly, not only memorizing enormous stretches of music, maybe 2-3 hours of music, but then inhabiting a character and becoming part of a physical production and navigating a way around the set and all of these physical objects and being in an imaginary world. And I think being in the room with singers working, and some great singers, and also working with great directors, I think was very illuminating in seeing how an opera comes alive, how it goes, as we say, from the page to the stage. And that probably also informs my choral work, because choral music and songs are also always telling stories. And I'm used to telling stories on stage, and that's one kind of narrative form. But even a 5-minute anthem is often it's a scene. It's of some kind. It's part of a narrative. So I think there's a strong storytelling streak in all of the different areas of music. But so that's what I hope. Does that answer your question about musical education?
Yes, it's again, I found that very helpful, your process for detail and how one aspect of music transforms into the next from
Hmm.
yeah, that's, I'm going to listen to this interview and listen to what you had to say quite a few times. That was, yeah, I'm fascinated with the creative process.
Hmm.
I think it's so vital and so important. It's such a gift to be free to explore that. And I don't think all parts of our society do that enough.
No, and when you mentioned it, your father, you used to hear your father improvising,
Yes,
and
yes.
and it's something I'm so grateful to my parents that they never stopped me improvising, even though they may have been wishing that I would just practice one piece and get it right, rather than like doing an impression of somebody who could play the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto. But in between, I would be making things up, and so there was always this very strong element of play, of exploration, and that is still how I write music today. It always begins with improvising, with just exploring, trying things out. And as I say, I think I feel that my parents were very enlightened to have either, I don't know whether they thought I was onto something, or just that there was no point in trying to interfere. But whatever it was, they did the right thing in not making me practice. And as a result, playing the piano and indeed improvising always remained a pleasure, and still is. And that's, I realise how lucky I am that every day I'm doing something that just gives me enormous pleasure.
Wow. So that I teach voice,
Hmm.
and I have a credential as a voice specialist, so I can fix damaged and injured voices as well. But to me, it's the same thing. I don't feel like I've ever worked a day in my life, and I can work with the human voice and sculpting the human voice and repairing it and moving on. And it's always different. It's not, it's like you say, it's more fun and easy to just keep creating and using all the education and experience that I have to move forward. Oh, that's really, I like this. Learning a little bit more about myself. So, the next question is, what inspires you to compose?
So, yes, I think I've mentioned storytelling already, and I think that is a big thing for me. I mean, a piece of music can start from an image. It may start just from a sound. It could be from walking down the street and a little obsessive rhythm starts in my head. I don't know where it's come from, but it wants to be made into something. But most often, I am thinking about a story. I'm imagining certain scenes. And that can happen in purely instrumental pieces too. I've just written a clarinet concerto which is inspired by the rainbow. So that's not exactly a narrative, but it is certainly an image. And when you start to imagine somebody looking at a rainbow and what they feel and how they relate to the different colours and what different sort of emotional qualities there are with the different colours of the rainbow, then there's if not exactly a story, but it's not unlike a story that sort of starts to emerge there. I mean, right now I am making a family opera out of the children's book The Secret Garden. And so that obviously is full of images and extraordinary moments. And there's the sound of a bird song, and a robin is a crucial character who tells somebody where the key is to open the door to the secret garden. So what's the key going to sound like, and what does the robin sound like, and what will it sound like when the door opens? These are all things that I'm wondering about and that spark music. It's funny because as a child, I don't remember so often making a really strong connection between music and other things. I was really happy just with the sounds, and but I do also remember that I sometimes had a book open in front of me on the music stand of the piano while I was improvising, and I can remember reading The Hobbit and sort of playing it at the same time. So I guess I did sometimes make that connection, and it certainly has, as I've got older, it has become those things have become fused together, I guess.
I can hear that fusing, and then just in your description again about how you sort through you get that little hook, but then it becomes a personal experience. The rainbow, for instance, it's you're able to communicate that and reach us when you do that. It's really thrilling. The next question is, what is your compositional process?
So as we've talked about a bit, it does start, it always starts with improvisation. I mean, I say always, it can be that sometimes I might just, be sitting thinking and notes will come to me. But as I'm often writing vocal music, I'm thinking, well, they're going to be singing words, I must find the words. And often the search for the right words is the hardest part, and takes the longest. They Will Rise is an exception because I was given the text by the cathedral who was putting together the celebration for the Royal Air Force. It is an official text of the Royal Air Force. I think I had a choice about which Bible translation to use, but that was very simple, and so I didn't have to go hunting for the words. I knew straight away what the words were going to be, and I just had to see whether they sparked anything. But often I'm looking for the right words, and I'm reading a poem or a psalm. I'm imagining the kind of music that it wants, because words tell you how they want to be said. They tell you how they should go when you sing them. Although they probably tell me something different to what they would tell you, but they have messages. And then I had to think, well, are these sounds that I want to make, or do I have the right sounds in me to make? So that can be a very large part of the process. But then a big thing for me was using very basic technology. So when I started out, I was always making things up at the piano, but whenever I tried to write them down, they seemed to vanish. They eluded me. I could not capture them. Mm-hmm. And what I wrote down was always disappointing by comparison. I felt that I'd played something much more exciting, but I couldn't remember it for long enough. And it takes, writing down music is quite a slow process. And so it was only when I finally got a cassette recorder that I was able to, I just keep it on the piano, and whenever I felt that I was about to have a good idea, or as soon as I felt I had just had a good idea, I would hit record and capture it. Now I have a keyboard plugged into the computer, but it's doing the same thing. It's just capturing anything that I play, and because of modern technology, I can use my keyboard to play any instrument that I want. So I can make the sound of an organ, but it could be a French horn. It could, and so I've always got this direct experience of the sound, and I think I need that, or it certainly sparks my imagination. And then I just try things out, really. And some days are good and some days are less good, but I sort of capture everything, or as much as I can, anything that I think is worth capturing. And particularly with longer pieces, I make a recording of what I'm working on, and I put it into my phone, and I walk around the park listening to it. So I'm maybe listening to lots of sketches, just little fragments of things, bits of music that I've imagined for a particular moment in a piece. I might be singing. Because anything that vocal, I will always sing it myself, and so my fingers will be the orchestra or the organ, whatever it is. And so I listen to these snippets, and sometimes I think, oh, actually, that was a good one. That there's something in there. There's more in there, and I can sense that it's got a future. That it's a piece, that it's a fragment that is trying to grow and become something larger. And then later on, I still carry on walking around the park listening as the piece nears completion. And I try to listen to it as if it were by somebody else, and just think, well, am I enjoying this? And is it coming across? I suppose is a big thing for me. So I'm glad that you picked up on the feeling of communication that I want to have that connection. I'm hoping that the listener will feel what I was feeling when I read these words. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that means, it hasn't quite come over yet, and I need to try harder or try something different. Or maybe it's just gone on too long, and actually I need to shorten it. And so that's all. So walking is involved. Sometimes there can be composing, riding a bicycle, and being near water I found is often quite helpful. So cycling along the canal. Mm-hmm. Sometimes ideas really sort themselves out in my head. But as I say, I think most of the time I like to be in direct contact with the sound. So it's not just imagining it, but actually physically hearing it, hearing a version of the sound. Though, the thrill for me is that with all vocal pieces, I sing them, and I'm used to hearing myself singing them. When the real choir sings it or a real soloist sings it, it's always better than me singing it. So the real thing is always better than what I have had in my ears up until that point. So it's always a treat to get to the real performance.
Mm. Wow, I do hear in the opera arias, and I'm fascinated to hear you say how you work until you get the right expression and sound, because the placement of the words and the rhythm that you offer us is again, it's a very unique sound, but your music doesn't sound all the same, but it has this energy and these pieces that go together that when you do say something, it makes us listen. It's very vital. It's very vital. I think reaching people want to be thrilled to death. And you're understanding some part of that really well. As I listen, and I think the rest of the world will agree with me, and Queen Elizabeth did as well. This means so much to me. I just want to thank you so much for this interview, and I'm going to study what you have to say. You've given me so much to think about, and to get closer to your music, and I'm going to continue to study it, and this is just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. It'd be lovely to have a chance to talk to you, and I hope your singers really enjoy They Will Rise.
They do, and several of them have reached out to me very independently and said how thrilled they are to sing the They Will Rise, and I put that at the end of the piece, at the end of the whole concert, and it will be very uplifting to finish my concert with your brilliant composing.
Oh, thank you very much, Robin.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.